start the meeting.
Thank you, Reagan. For the record, this is Jean Payton, and I'm welcoming you just to the November 18th, 2020 Transportation Access Advisory Committee. Reagan, I've got terrible feedback.
One second. Jean, I'm not getting any feedback either.
If we could mute everybody except Jean.
Everyone has been muted. Jean, I do see that you're logged on twice, so that could be the source of your feedback.
All right, I'm sorry. I was logged on twice, and I guess that was the problem. So, having done that already, we'll begin the meeting with our staff liaison, Reagan Lively, doing a roll call, a listing of staff that is on the line for the meeting, as well as some housekeeping rules. So, Reagan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Reagan Lively, Management Analyst for the RTC for the record. I will be calling your name in alphabetical order. Please unmute your line and confirm your attendance as I read your name. Nancy Brune. Nancy Brune, still with us? All right, well, we'll move on down the line. Dan Hyde.
Present.
Thank you, Dan. Dr. Christine Moninghoff.
Present.
Chuck Newhoner.
Present.
Madam Chairwoman Jean Payton.
Present.
All right, and Nancy Brune, are you still with us? Can you hear us okay? Okay, thank you, everyone. Please note that we have several RTC staff on the line for today's meeting. This includes Dan Holland, Director of Paratransit and Specialized Services, Ms. Antoinette Braddock, Manager of Paratransit Operations and Specialized Services, Mr. Jim Champeau, Transit Mobility Program Supervisor, Mr. Andrew Kelman, Manager Transportation Planning, and Sherwin Gutierrez, Director of Finance. We also have Francis Julian joining us as well. As the chair mentioned, I have a few housekeeping items to go over. When the chair asks for comments from the committee or calls for a vote, please remember to unmute yourself before speaking. Remember to state your name for the record before providing comment. Be sure to mute your line if you are not speaking. Voting will be done verbally. The chair will call for ayes and nays. If there are no nays, then the motion will carry. If there are nays, then a roll call vote will be required. In the event of a roll call vote, please wait for your name to be read to provide your vote. The chair will call for any comments or questions after an item has been presented. Thank you, Chairwoman Payton.
Thank you, Reagan. And then first item on the agenda is public comment. But before we begin that, I'd like to call on Dan Howland to explain to us once again the reason for this revised way of handling public comments. So Dan, could you explain that to us again, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. As members of the committee, Dan Howland, Director of Paratransit Specialized Services for the record. As you know, on March 22nd, 2020, the State of Nevada Executive Department issued Declaration of Emergency Directive 006, which suspended the requirement to have a physical location for public meetings. Pursuant to Directive 006, and for the health and safety of the community, this meeting is being held telephonically. For the first citizens participation period, Ms. Reagan Lively will read the public comments received by the RTC. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dan. As Dan said, this first public comment period is limited to items that are on today's agenda. Reagan will read the comments that have been submitted to the RTC electronically, and she'll read the first 500 words of each comment. However, if the comments exceed 500 words, the entire comment will be listed in the minutes of this meeting. So Reagan, are there any comments that have been submitted for public comment session number 1?
Thank you, Chairwoman Payton. Reagan Lively, Management Analyst for the RTC for the record. There are no public comments at this time. Madam Chair, that concludes this first public comment period.
All right, thank you, Reagan. And I'm going to take just a moment to say to everyone here on the call that in the past few months, we have lost 2 really good friends of ours. And so Dan Howland is going to speak about these individuals. So Dan, could you take over, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dan Howland, Director of Paratransit and Specialized Services for the record again. Yes, we did lose 2 people very close to us. As you can see here pictured is Linda English. Linda English was a call center rep here at the RTC for many years. And I knew Linda, but I unfortunately have gotten to know her even better since her passing. And I can tell you that this is a lady who really wanted to pay it forward without anything in return. Recently, our manager of customer care, Kenny Rodriguez, along with our government affairs and MJ Maynard, our CEO, put together a remembrance for her that was shared at the all hands meeting, which also included a family member of Linda's. And the remembrances really just showed the spirit that Linda carried with her day in and day out, paying it forward, giving back, expecting nothing in return, as I said. So she is missed in the call center family, and she will be missed by the RTC family. And I would just ask you all to keep her in your thoughts and her family as well. And then there is passing with this committee, the TAAC committee, a gentleman who was on it for years. I've known Mr. Steele for 7 years. In that time, I spent quite a bit of time in conversation with him, and he was just a terrific man who was committed to public transportation, committed to paratransit, the Americans for Disabilities Act, and safety. Ralph was always someone who would speak his mind, and he did so in a positive manner, which helped the RTC during our vehicle procurements, especially where he helped our RTC fleet team work on improving the suspensions of our cutaway vehicles. And that was many years ago, and that suspension improvement remains. But Ralph was someone who is very interested in public affairs. He shared his concerns and his ideas with us at every meeting. And I can show you they're pictured in the middle with his wife, who often joined him at the TAAC meetings. Ralph went to a Star Trek convention that his son took him to, and Ralph almost caused us to miss the start of a meeting because he was talking about his exciting time there at the convention as he was a Star Trek fan. So I know that the committee members will miss him. RTC will miss him, but we thank him for all his contributions. He was just a wonderful person, and we are so happy to have him on the TAAC committee. So please keep him and his family in your thoughts. Thank you.
Madam Chair, this is Reagan Lively for the record. Raymond Fletcher has been able to join us. I just wanted to confirm, Raymond, that you can hear us okay and see the presentation okay. Raymond, your line is still muted. If you could unmute yourself and let us know if you can hear us okay. All right, we'll check back a little bit later. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Raymond. We hear you. Thank you.
This is Jean, and I'd just like to add that I knew both Linda and Ralph. Ralph probably better than Linda, and it's a very sad moment, you know, to lose two people that were so transit-oriented and so helpful in everything that they did. And I'd like to just encourage us to take a moment to think about both of them before we move forward. Thank you for taking that time. Are there any other comments from individuals that knew either Linda or Ralph before we move forward? Hearing none, then let's move on to the next part of our agenda. Item number 2 is the approval of the minutes of the September 23rd, 2020 meeting. I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Madam Chair, this is Dan Hyde. I so move.
Thank you, Dan. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes as they were sent? Hearing none, all in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Are there any nays? Okay, the minutes are approved. Thank you. Items 3 and 4, the consent agenda. Those are items, if we approve this, we cannot discuss any items on the consent agenda. If there's anything you would like to discuss, you would need to move to remove it from the consent agenda. So to begin with, I'll ask for an approval of items 4 and 5, the consent agenda.
Madam Chair, this is Dan Hyde. I so move.
Thank you, Dan. Would anyone like to remove any item from the consent agenda so that we can discuss it before we make the vote on this item? Hearing nothing, all in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Are there any opposed? Say nay. Okay, then we're on to item number 6, which is a presentation on new web-based and mobile technology that will be put out to paratransit users beginning in early 2021. And that's going to be given by Antoinette Braddock. So Antoinette, you ready?
I sure am. And boy, we didn't make that easy on you. That was a lot of words, wasn't it? So anyway, good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. For the record, this is Antoinette Braddock, manager of RTC Paratransit and Specialized Services. RTC staff is regularly looking for ways and opportunities to improve our paratransit's customer experience. We look for ways to make their experience more user-friendly, more efficient, and more consistent with our other public transportation offerings. With that said, I'm excited to tell you a little bit about a new product offering that the RTC is working on for our paratransit customers. Over the last 10 months, RTC staff, along with our technical partner, TAAC, has been busy designing and testing an app and online dashboard that will give our paratransit customers the flexibility to schedule, track, and review their paratransit rides. We've branded this My RTC Para, your full ride access. And if you can see the slide kind of down at the bottom, you'll see our branded logo. Next slide, please. So let me tell you a little bit about what our customers can expect. Customers will have the ability to manage their paratransit rides, either online through a web-based dashboard or via an app using their smartphone. Customers can schedule their rides at their convenience, no telephone wait times. Customers can also easily make changes or cancel a ride. Noting here, this will help with late cancels and wasted driver resources when they're showing up to pick up a client who may have had a late cancel because they weren't feeling well that morning and wasn't able to call into the call center in time. Customers will be able to see where their vehicle is and an expected arrival. Another note, we expect this to also help with no-shows and long wait times. The technology meets visually impaired accessibility standards, and it also reduces pressure on our call center. This is also notable because not only does this benefit the agency, the RTC, but it also benefits our customers, the customers that won't specifically be utilizing this technology, so it'll lessen their hold times. Next slide, please. So where are we in the process? Last night, actually, the RTC's awesome IT department, along with TAAC support team, they did an upgrade to our TAAC system. And just for some context, this is the system that we do our scheduling, our dispatchers and drivers use to perform and manage your trips. The upgrade went well, and this upgrade was required in order for us to offer this new web and app technology. So in the weeks to come, RTC staff will conduct follow-up testing and review now that we've done that upgrade, and we'll be specifically looking at just the usability of the MyRTC website. Once we're comfortable with our internal testing, we will start to engage a small group of paratransit customers for a pilot test group. What we want to do here is we want to have RTC staff be very hands-on with this pilot group. Our goal is through our customers' eyes and fingers and ears to be able to iron out any wrinkles from the user perspective. And then with their feedback, we can make some changes as needed, some improvements if available. And then we're also looking for their feedback on the training tutorials that we'll be creating that will be used to distribute to the broader paratransit customer base when we're ready to launch the full technology to all of our customers. So we anticipate working and kind of starting to develop our pilot group middle to end of December. And we anticipate with their feedback and any action items from that feedback that we would launch this technology and this offer, this new offering mid-first quarter of 2021. And with that, those are my prepared statements. But if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Dan.
Yeah, Antoinette, question I have when you say full launch mid to first to mid quarter of 2021, that's January to March?
And I didn't mute. Yes, Mr. Hyde, that would be January to March of 2021. We want to iron out, any anomalies, get everything kind of squared away and be able to launch it within that time frame.
Okay, that answered it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions for Antoinette?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Raymond.
Antoinette, is this similar to the notifications that passengers receive through Tango?
So it will be similar, yeah. So basically it is the app. So Raymond, Mr. Fletcher, uses the Tango app to for the Ride on Demand program, which is what he's referring to. And so yes, so basically a customer can schedule their paratransit rides. They can schedule, and again, it's either through a smartphone or on a website. And so then you can get notifications. And this is not just for customers. I want to note it is for caretakers and family members. They can also, book their loved ones' rides and have those notifications. And so, yep, they'll get the notification, kind of like a ping to see, they can kind of see, where it might be that it's at, 2 different cross streets. It's on, between Tomato Lane and Lettuce Avenue. And then they'll know, that it's going to arrive within like 15 minutes of those two, of where it's located currently.
Madam Chair, a couple follow-ups, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
And Antoinette, what you talk about location. One of my issues with the Tango app is that it constantly says it's 2 minutes away, and it's been like that for a couple of years. Number one, I'd like to volunteer for the pilot program if that's allowable. And then the other one is, are you going to be able to purchase your passes and whatnot through this rather than going through a third party like PayPal or something?
Okay, so good question. So in regards to the pilot group, we will definitely reach out, and we definitely have some ideas of some customers who we believe would be some value added, because we want good feedback and keeping us accountable and on our toes. So that's one piece of your question. And then in regards to the fare payment, this iteration of the app doesn't currently allow for purchasing payment or paying for a ride. However, we have some really smart people within our agency that are working on some options for our paratransit customer base for app-based payments. And, one of those individuals is Michelle Whitney, and I think she's actually in this meeting with us. And I don't want to put her on the spot either way, but she's been working hard on a lot of opportunities. So that fare payment will not be released and is not in the works from my perspective right this minute, but from an RTC agency perspective, they are looking at it and working really diligently on something to offer our paratransit customers in the future. Don't throw tomatoes at me, Raymond. I'm sorry, but we're getting there.
Thank you, Antoinette. I just find it frustrating having to use something like PayPal, only because some years back using PayPal, I had to deal with identity theft. And without actually going to the BTC to buy a pass, with COVID and whatnot, purchasing them online is much easier. But unfortunately, you have to go through this and you have no other way.
I hear you loud and clear and agree. And we are working really hard. I know Michelle is always working and looking at opportunities.
Thank you, Antoinette, and thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions for Antoinette? Well, it sounds pretty exciting, Antoinette, so I'm looking forward to it coming out. And thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda.
Madam Chair,
Yes, I'm sorry.
Madam Chair, this is Reagan Lively again for the
Yes,
record.
Reagan.
Amanda Shipp has joined our call. Amanda, I just want to confirm that you can hear us okay.
Yes, I can.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amanda. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Item number 8 on the agenda is a presentation on the paratransit path of travel conditional eligibility, and that's going to be presented by Jim Champeau. Jim, you ready?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. Jim Champeau, Transit Mobility Program Supervisor for the record. I'm here today to give a presentation on the new paratransit path of travel conditional eligibility process. Next slide, please. So we'll start with a little bit about what is path of travel. So path of travel, or POT for short, is the process of determining whether or not a person has a barrier-free path of travel to and from a location which they are traveling to. So physical barriers can include, but are not limited to, missing or broken sidewalks, light poles, fire hydrants, steep grades, construction, vegetation, or missing curb cuts. Next slide, please. So how did we get here? In 2018, the Federal Transit Administration, the FTA, conducted an audit of the RTC Paratransit Certification Department. Including in their final report was a recommendation that the RTC make customers using power or manual mobility devices at least conditionally eligible for ADA paratransit services for path of travel barriers. A customer is granted path of travel conditional eligibility in and of itself would have been denied paratransit service prior to the FTA final report because they exhibited the functional ability to utilize fixed route during their assessment for paratransit. Next slide, please. So what is the RTC's goal with this? The RTC will ensure through its path of travel process that customers will be able to use the mode of transportation that is most appropriate for their condition. The RTC's fixed route fleet is 100% accessible to people with disabilities. Having access to all modes of transportation promotes inclusivity throughout the community. And due to the FTA's findings, the RTC needed to look at ways to offset additional costs associated. Next slide, please. So we'll talk a little bit about what has been done so far. The RTC has consulted with other transit agencies to see how they were handling similar situations as this. The RTC Mobility Training Department completed an audit and mapping of all of the RTC's fixed route transit lines for path of travel barriers. The RTC Transit Amenities Department completed an audit of all 3,339 fixed route transit stops for ADA accessibility. Next slide, please. So what this is, and if you can see this, this is a software program that my department along with IT developed to be able to map some of the barriers that exist out in the community. So as part of this, myself and my staff drove every transit line here in Las Vegas looking for barriers. When we found a barrier, we would stop, we would map that barrier, take photos of the barrier, measurements of the barrier if necessary, and put it into a database. This will allow us to continue to track these throughout this process, adding and deleting as necessary. Now, one of the exciting things that we've kind of done with this is we have talked with the Metropolitan Planning Organization for RTC and has shared this information with them. They were very excited to get this information as they've been wanting to try to get something like this from some of the entities for a long time. So with this information, they're going to contact the other entities within Clark County, City of Las Vegas, City of North Las Vegas, Henderson, share this information with them, and present this information for them to be able to fix some of these barriers, and they're going to work with them closely. So this is going to be kind of a jumping off point for all of these entities to be able to not only help our paratransit and fixed route customers, but also help any customer with a disability in this town be able to get where they need to go barrier free. So can we go to the next slide, please? Below is this is a photo that's in that database of one of the obstacles that we ran into while we were out doing our mapping. So obviously you can see with somebody's wisdom here, they put a telephone pole right in the middle of a sidewalk. So with this, we put this information in the mapping system. We also take measurements of the clearance on each side of this and so that we know this is there in the future. So if somebody has a trip that they're taking along this path, we will know exactly, how that barrier would impede them. So can we go to the next slide? So program impact. The RTC identified 368 customers with the condition of path of travel. Letters were mailed in October informing customers that the RTC will start auditing their paratransit trips beginning November 1st, 2020. Only customers with a condition of POT whose trips were found to have no barriers could be impacted by this change. Path of travel is an eligibility condition, so the above number of 368 we will expect to grow over time. Next slide. So a little bit on this process and how this is going to work. So starting 11/1/2020, the RTC will begin auditing paratrips for POT barriers. The RTC will conduct an in-person path of travel analysis for these clients looking for barriers to accessing fixed route transportation. So how that will work is the staff will go out, they will go to a person's point of origin, wherever the trip would start. They will take that path that they would take to their closest bus stop, and then they will get to the destination bus stop and take that trip that they would take walking or using their mobility device to their destination looking for barriers. So be laying physical eyes on this path of travel. If no physical barriers are found, that specific trip will be denied on ADA paratransit. Customers will be sent a letter notifying them of the denial of that specific trip, along with turn-by-turn directions for taking that trip using the RTC fixed route service, along with the appeals process. Customers will have 14 days to appeal the decision of the RTC and 30 days to make the transition to an alternative mode of transportation. And we'll also have access to RTC travel training program if needed to help them with their trip. Next slide. And that concludes the presentation that I prepared, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Jim. Are there any questions for Jim? Jim, yes, go ahead. Is that Raymond?
Yes, Raymond Fletcher for the record. Jim, one of my concerns on this is some of the routes, I know more of the buses that we're getting on the road for fixed route, some allow up to 4 mobility devices, but then we got to take into consideration, like when we do actually have rain, time of day, if mobility devices are occupied on that trip while someone's waiting to support fixed route. Have you thought about what PWD would do in those instances?
Can you repeat some of that, Raymond? You were breaking up a little bit.
I said, even though some of the buses have 4 slots for mobility devices, especially with COVID right now, we're trying to socially distance. We got things like monsoon season. Some individuals have larger size mobility devices. What if someone's trying to utilize the fixed route through this, but the slots are taken up for mobility devices with other mobility devices, or they have a larger size mobility device, or it happens to be the time of season when we're experiencing rain?
Okay, I got you. Some of the to address some of those questions, for monsoon season, rain, those kind of things, we do understand those kind of things happen. But for, say, a person that wasn't paratransit eligible that chooses to use fixed route, those are things that, they deal with just exactly like anybody else would. As far as, a device that might be larger, we're going to have that information because when they come in for paratransit service, we measure their mobility devices and we know just exactly what they're using. So, if we have, issues in those areas, we can talk with the individual and work with them on that. And also, if an individual comes up with some sort of an instance that they feel could be a barrier to them that they didn't feel was covered during that, they can always contact us back and let us know. And then we can have the ability to reassess at that particular point in time.
Thank you.
Are there other questions for Jim? Jim, I do have a question. I'm not sure I understood correctly. In 2018, FTA came out with a statement, and my understanding was that it said that those that use mobility devices should be considered conditional riders on paratransit. Is that what they're...
Correct, because what they said is that, without looking at an individual route, a transit agency would have no idea of knowing whether or not they were to their path. So in response to that, because we have the ability to enforce conditions on eligibility, we decided to come up with a process to be able to go out and actually take a look at those paths and actually lay eyes on them. And, not just looking on a Google Maps or something like that, because there's things out there that we can't see, but to measure grade and to look at individual barriers. And by doing that, then we could mitigate, some of the number of people that were given that eligibility. Because again, prior to that eligibility, these people would have no other conditions or no other eligibility other than the fact that they were using a mobility device.
Okay, so at this point, the path of travel only is for those conditional people, individuals who use mobility devices.
Correct, and have no other eligibility conditions other than path of travel. If they have another eligibility condition, say it was distance or something like that, that eligibility condition supersedes path of travel. So they would not be part of this process.
Okay. And one final thing, well, two things actually. The 368 people that you identified, are those people that were up for recertification now, or are these people throughout the whole system?
These are people throughout the whole system. We just went through and did a query through TAAC to see how many people had only the condition of path of travel.
Okay, great. And the last thing is just a comment. I'm really glad to see that there is an appeal process in this. That's good to hear.
Absolutely. So, and during that appeals process, if they come to us and say, well, there is this particular barrier, we will be sending staff out to physically lay eyes on that barrier and look at what they tell us is preventing them from doing that before we end up.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Dan.
Dan Howland, Director of Paratransit, for the record. I just want to add that with this FTA audit and this request from the FTA, we are not alone as far as transit agencies go. Other transits have had similar requests put upon them, and they have responded in a similar fashion as we have here. Just some examples, LA Access, Capital Metro in Austin, Texas, to name a couple. So just wanted to let you know that.
Good. We're not alone then. That's always good. Are there any other questions for Jim? Okay, nice job, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Next on our agenda is item number 7, which is a review of the draft 2021 to 2050 regional transportation plan, and that's going to be presented by Andrew Kelman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Andrew Kelman, Manager of Transportation Planning for the record. This item is to review the draft regional transportation plan for 2021 to 2050, which is named Access 2050. And I have about a 10-minute presentation here for you today. The draft regional transportation plan, or RTP, is now available for public review and comment during a 30-day comment period that ends next Wednesday. The document and all project lists are now available on the RTC website, and there is also a survey open right now as well on the website. Next slide, please. The current RTP was adopted in 2017, and federal regulations require it to be updated every 4 years. The RTP must have a planning horizon of at least 20 years, and this proposed plan looks out to 30 years. With this long-term outlook, the purpose of the RTP is to forecast the long-term transportation needs and goals for our region's surface transportation system, and then to identify the specific projects and programs for implementation. The primary method the RTP is developed is through public and stakeholder outreach. Next slide. The process we have taken for developing the RTP, it all started a little less than 2 years ago when the RTC conducted a transportation visioning survey. This critical input then led to the development of specific strategies to implement. Another key milestone in developing the plan was a call for projects that went out to all local agencies earlier this year. Through this call for projects process, the RTC identified 71 new high priority projects that will utilize federal funding for completion. And then in this current final phase of plan development, the RTC is conducting public outreach on specific projects and the overall plan. And finally, the plan will be taken to the RTC board for consideration in January of 2021. Next slide, please. So going back to the beginning and talking about the vision survey, it was central to ensuring the RTP reflects the preferred priorities of residents. To gain this insight, a transportation vision survey was conducted. The survey was offered in English and in Spanish, both online and on paper, and was promoted at numerous in-person outreach events. So this is pre-COVID. Access 2050 incorporates far more public input than any previous RTP. Over 12,200 survey responses were received when the survey closed in December of 2018, making the survey one of the largest reviews ever conducted of Southern Nevadans' attitudes and preferences about transportation. Next slide, please. One of the main findings of the survey was that residents want more investment in all forms of transportation. Responses to multiple questions showcased the need for investments in roads, transit, bicycle, and pedestrian facilities. And this was key because the majority of survey respondents identified that they drove their own vehicle every single day. The survey even provided the option to select, we don't need any transportation investments at all. But that option of no investment was only selected by 2% of respondents. So the need for greater broad-based transportation investment was made clear from this vision survey. Next slide. In terms of prioritizing investments, with the majority of respondents being car owners, many residents describe a desire for improvements in road maintenance, improved safety, and fewer traffic jams. But importantly, a majority support investments in transit and walking and biking infrastructure, even people who drive daily. And just a note on this graphic for the math, respondents were able to select more than one option, so they don't add up to 100%. And these are the top 5 priorities shown out of 8 total options. Next slide. So what we did with these survey findings is that we then synthesized and used them to guide development of the document. Access 2050 was drafted with a focus on implementing the survey investment priorities into guiding the overall mobility strategies. The 5 identified primary strategies closely match the survey priorities of improving safety, managing congestion, multimodal connectivity, maintaining current infrastructure, and promoting economic development. There are also secondary strategies for the plan, and these have been assembled through coordination with local, state, and federal agencies to ensure the RTP meets the long-term transportation planning needs of the region. Next slide. And it should also be noted that these strategies were not developed in isolation at the RTC with our vision survey. This table shows how the plan reinforces similar goals developed and included in local comprehensive plans from each entity in Southern Nevada, as well as the Southern Nevada Strong Regional Plan. Next slide. The primary purpose of the RTP is to identify the long-term transportation needs for our region. As one of the fastest growing regions in the country, our needs will largely be driven by forecasted continued population growth. Southern Nevada is currently home to more than 2.3 million residents, and the region will surpass 3 million residents by the year 2050. This graphic displays the location of that forecasted population growth. And the darker colors, as you can see, most of that growth is concentrated outside the 215 Beltway, where new development is occurring. Next slide. So this rapid growth in population can then strain the region's transportation system by increasing automobile travel, also referred to as VMT, or vehicle miles traveled. All areas of Southern Nevada will experience significant increases in travel over the next 30 years. The largest increase in travel will be additional trips occurring within the urban core surrounding the resort corridor area. So on this map, it's that red color. So this area alone will experience a 66% increase in new travel over and above today's levels. Next slide. To meet these regional growth challenges, Access 2050 proposes a balanced investment program that directly addresses this growth reality while also being responsive to the mobility preferences of residents. The investment approach is to select and fund projects that address one of the primary RTP strategies. This map helps provide an understanding of what projects are included in the plan. The plan includes over 200 projects, but some of those projects can't be put on a map. A few example projects that can't be mapped are safe routes to schools, programs, so programmatic improvements, and additional funding for RTC's paratransit fleet and fixed route fleet. We can't put that on a map, but they are included in the plan. 188 of the projects included in the plan can be mapped, and you see those displayed here. Next slide. And I just want to quickly highlight how individual projects help implement overall strategies. So this is an example of a safety project included in the plan from Clark County. Clark County actually has a few pedestrian flasher safety projects included in the plan. Here is one of them. This is school zone flashers for Reese Elementary School in the Southwest Valley. Next slide. This is an example of 2 congestion projects included in the plan. The City of North Las Vegas's signalization project on North 5th Street and intersection improvements at North 5th Street and Cheyenne. Next slide. Here is an example of a multimodal project that focuses on bicycle and pedestrian users. It is the design and construction of the Via Nobilia Trail in West Henderson. Next slide. And finally, the plan's largest investment category is for maintenance projects. And this matches both local needs and preferences from the Vision Survey. This is an example maintenance project from the City of Las Vegas for reconstruction of the Charleston Boulevard underpass. Next slide. So that highlighted a few individual projects contained in the plan, but taken as a whole, the investments in the plan help get people to the places they need and want to go. One way the plan achieves this is by reducing congestion, And we can see this by comparing the no build and the build scenarios of the plan. What it does is it compares the impacts of implementing the projects included in the plan to a future with similar population growth, but without the additional infrastructure. These maps both display traffic congestion in 2050 and show that the RTP has a significant impact on reducing congestion. Next slide. Another way of looking at these same benefits is at the individual level. So right now, average time spent driving today in Southern Nevada is currently 32 minutes per day. By the year 2050, that daily travel will increase to 36 minutes per day with this plan's investments. But if you take those investments away, it would increase to 42 minutes per day in the year 2050. Next slide. Another essential benefit of reduced congestion is improved air quality. Per federal regulations, this plan must not contribute to any violation of air quality standards. And this plan has met these standards by demonstrating that travel-related emissions are less than the established budgets for 3 pollutants. And the 3 pollutants we measure here locally are carbon monoxide, particulate matter 10, those are on the top table, and then ozone. Ozone is on the bottom table. And so we met our budgets for all 3 of those pollutants. Next slide. So in summary, all of these various inputs fed into the plan, and the document outlines a vision that results in safer roads, fewer delays, more travel choices, and a stronger economy. Next slide. But the RTC is still seeking feedback on the plan. We want to hear if the plan matches your priorities. The RTC is seeking community-wide input during a 30-day comment period through November 25th. And what we are asking for is review of the plan and the project list and weigh in if you have anything you would like us to know. You can submit your comments online or take the survey there at rtcsnv.com/access2050. And I just want to note that on that website, there is a fully accessible screen reader compatible version of the plan that is available. Next slide. And that concludes my presentation. This item is simply informational because the public comment period is still currently open. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Are there any questions for Andrew? This was a lot of information. Okay, if you haven't taken that survey or reviewed the information online, I would encourage you to do that before the deadline. Thank you so much, Andrew. That was really a good report.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Raymond.
I got a couple questions, if I may. I want to see if anyone else wanted to weigh in. I didn't want to be the only one asking questions.
Okay. Go
Andrew,
ahead.
You had 12,200 people respond for ideas.
Yeah, Madam Chair, through you, that is correct. That was for the vision survey about 2 years ago. That was outreach conducted in connection with the onboard mobility plan. And we designed that survey to ask a wide variety of transportation questions. And so we used that as we were developing this regional transportation plan.
Madam Chair, so Andy, you said that we have about 2.3 million people in Las Vegas. That means that's 0.0061. That's less realistically than 100th of the population. That's not even 1% of the total community weighing in on a plan like this. What is going to be the cost the taxpayers incur? Are new taxes going to be needed? Are we planning on extending the fuel revenue tax? I mean, there's an awful lot of questions that I have.
Yeah, Madam Chair, through you again. Point taken on the number of survey responses. We did gather demographic data of survey respondents just to ensure that they matched the composition of our region, of the people who currently live here. And we did that. There is a good match on who we heard from. And then we also, through our in-person outreach on the survey, we hit all parts of the valley. So we weren't just concentrating in Henderson or in North Las Vegas. We went everywhere. So we tried to represent the region geographically as well. And the point about funding for the plan, that's a very good point. Everything in this plan is currently funded with currently available revenues. So that's one key attribute of a regional transportation plan, is that it's fiscally constrained. And so it does not include any new taxes or revenue sources that are not available today. This plan is fully funded.
Madam Chair, but Andrew, you had also said this pre-COVID, a number of people have lost their jobs. A number of businesses have been closing because of the down that we're having to do. You know, and not even to take into consideration the underground people mover that was supposed to just be under the convention authority. Now there's conversations of moving it down to Fremont, you know, and throughout other parts of the area. How is that going to affect this plan?
Madam Chair, through you. So the Boring Company project, we're really taking a wait and see approach to see what kind of impacts that has on travel in the resort corridor. We just don't know. So we haven't been able to include it in our travel demand model to date. As we were developing the plan, the project proposal for the Boring Company was all on the convention center site. And just very recently, we've learned that, yes, they do have plans to leave the convention center site. But we do want to monitor that project and see what its benefits and impacts are to travel in the region. I hope that answered your question.
I mentioned pre-COVID and whatnot. I still haven't heard an answer on that. But still, Madam Chair, I wouldn't want to say that I am opposed to this. But I mean, I'm all for advances and improvements in our community, but there are so many uncertainties right now. You know, we don't know when we're going to start getting the revenues back with convention place and everything, with people going back to work and being able to support themselves. I mean, for crying out loud, we still have people waiting to get their unemployment. There's so much uncertainty with this. And like you had said, Andrew, this was pre-COVID that you did. And I think the uncertainty and the changes, I think you might want to take another look.
Yeah, one more comment, Madam Chair, through you. When I said pre-COVID, that was referencing the outreach we did related to the vision survey in 2018. The finance assumptions, the revenue assumptions, and the assembly of the project list, that was all done this year during the summer. So COVID was already well underway. And we did take the latest, we reflected the latest revenue estimates from the federal sources, the state sources, and our local sources as well. And so those are reflected in the plan.
Andrew, are we going to see this again, or is this our last time to hear from you?
Madam Chair, the schedule has this going to EAC in December and then the board for consideration of approval in January. So this was the only presentation planned to this committee. And we really wanted to time it this way while the public comment period was open. So any comments you may have, we can receive those and reflect those as we are finalizing the development of the plan. So this was the last plan presentation during the development phase, but I'm more than happy to come back in the future and provide an update.
We may ask you to do that, but my question was really a little bit in response to Raymond's concerns. Raymond, I think if you haven't done the survey, there's probably an opportunity to voice your concerns in that survey. And I would sure encourage you to go to the, perhaps send a letter to MJ and go to the commission meeting if you feel that strongly, and I think you do, that you're concerned about this. I think all citizens need to do that. And if there are other board members, committee members that feel the same way, I would encourage you to do the same thing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Absolutely, I will, because as I have indicated, we don't know when the end of this global pandemic is going to come to a close. We don't know when our fellow Nevadans are going to be able to get back to work. We don't know what our community is going to look like at the end of this. What kind of businesses are still going to exist? Businesses have been shutting down. People can't even put on the table. I mean, and we're planning for something when we don't know what's going to happen. That's like building a fire station outside of a community. That fire station is going to have nowhere to go because there's no one to be there.
Well, I think you raised some good points, and I'm glad that you're going to follow up on those. And as I said, I'd encourage any committee members that feel the same way to make sure that you have your voice heard. And are there any other questions for Andrew? Well, thank you very much, Andrew. That was interesting and a lot of information. So thanks. Next on our agenda is a financial update for fiscal year 2020, and that will be presented by Sherwin Gutierrez. Sherwin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sherwin Gutierrez, Director of Finance, for the record. I'm here to present a financial update for the RTC. Next slide, please. This slide, we are doing a comparison of recessions. The green line showed our 2008 recession, and then the red line is for our 2020 COVID recession. So in fiscal 2008, there was a gradual decline versus a steep decline in fiscal year 2020. And as we all know, that's mainly due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In fiscal 2008, it took us about 27 months to reach the lowest point at 26.8% versus 2 months in fiscal 2020 at the lowest point of 35.5%. Decreases were less severe in May and June, but as we were creating the final budget in May, we have very little information to base our revenue projections on that, other than what we're seeing in the news, the activity on the Strip Corridor, and also our close collaboration with our financial consultants. So we are very mindful of all of these things happening. Next slide, please. Can you click 2 more? Thank you. We set our fiscal year 20 projection in May for a 14% decline or decrease in sales tax. However, April, May, and June actual sales tax revenue were much better than projected, and fiscal 20 actual revenue was 9% down instead of 14%. This brought us an additional revenue of 11.5 million in fiscal 20 from what we've projected at 201 million. But still, we are down 20 million based on our pre-COVID projection of 232.9 million. Next slide, please. So as discussed in the previous slide, April, May, and June actual sales tax revenue were much better than projected. We can attribute this to several factors. Again, we have some stimulus package from the government, 600 per week in additional federal unemployment benefit. So those played a key role during the months of May and June. And as for the next few months, we are not certain for August, September, and moving forward. So next slide, please. 2008 recession for MVFT revenue was much more stable. The big decline in month 26 was an anomaly due to a large distributor not paying the tax for that month. And then, of course, the distributor has to pay that over time. In fiscal 2020, the MVFT experienced a sudden and steep decline, which is similar to our sales tax at the low point of 47.2%. Next slide, please. During March, April, May, we were monitoring the Nevada Fuel Distributors Association for fuel sales. Sales were about half of what was normal. In early May, we had preliminary March sales numbers that were consistent with half of March sales at about half of the normal level. During that time, we did not know if sales were going to get worse or improve. Thus, from a finance standpoint, we budget conservatively. April numbers came in at 48% down, which is very close to the half. May and June numbers came in much better than what we projected at 31% and 15% compared to the 59% projection. Next slide, please. Fuel revenue indexing is very similar to MVFT. We projected the same data at 59% decline during the pandemic, and then it came in much better for April, May, and June, 43, 27, and 13% compared to our projection. Next slide, please. Fuel revenue indexing too is very consistent with the other fuel taxes due to comparisons with pre-pandemic. June actually came above the fiscal 2019 actual, and this is mainly due to an indexing rate increase that happened last every July 1st of every year. One thing to note, MVFT or motor vehicle fuel tax, fuel revenue indexing, and fuel revenue indexing 2, these three revenue sources can only be used for roadway projects for our member jurisdiction. Next slide, please. So COVID-19 has taken a bigger toll on transit revenue due to the decrease in ridership and rear door boarding in April and May for the fixed route service. As you can see, starting 2016, we have some minor challenges on our gravy route, which is normally the strip corridor, due to our TNCs. With the influx of TNCs, we saw our revenue there slowly go down, and then with the pandemic, we had that steep decrease in transit revenue. So next slide, please. Similar to sales tax and motor vehicle fuel tax revenues, we saw a significant ridership decline in April to around 57.8%, and it has hovered around the 50% for May, June, and July. In fiscal 2008 recession, it took until month 30 to reach the lowest decline in ridership, which is just about 15.9%. Next slide, please. April and May were rear door boarding months, so thus we have very little fare revenue collected. We began front door boarding in the first week of June and started collecting fare again for our fixed route service. for fiscal 2020, we have experienced a 24% decline in fare revenue that equated to a loss of $16 million. Next slide, please. As a direct response to the COVID-19 pandemic, RTC was able to lower our actual operating expense of about $16 million. Can you please click one more? Thank you. So from what we budgeted of $247.8 million, we have our actual expenses came in at $231.8 million. Next slide, please. RTC was also able to lower our capital expenses by about $27.3 million by delaying capital projects by a year and some indefinitely until we start seeing recovery. Next slide. This concludes my prepared presentation, and I will be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Sherwin? I guess not. Maybe we're all just shocked. Okay, well, thank you, Sherwin.
Thank you, Matt.
I'm sure you'll keep us up to date as things move forward.
We'll definitely do, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. No, item number 9 is Dan Howland talking about preparations to reopen RTC's Mobility Training Center. Dan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dan Howland, Director of Paratransit and Specialized Services, for the record. And again, want to note what Madam Chair said was this presentation is about our preparations to reopen. There has been no date determined to actually reopen yet, but the point of this presentation is to share with you that we have been preparing and are prepared to reopen when that comes, and hopefully that will be soon. But that does not mean that the business of paratransit has stopped. Staff have been mailing out requests for applications. We've been receiving them, processing them as staff telecommute, come in and get work, process it, and then return it, etc. And as a result of that, many applicants have been given presumed eligibility. And what is presumed eligibility? Well, because the MTC is closed and they can't come in, we're giving them temporary eligibility with the understanding that they will have to come in the future for an interview and possibly a physical assessment. Speaking of physical assessments, the RTC has had to make some changes. We had a contractor, an excellent contractor, NCEP, that provided our physical assessments prior to COVID, and we ended that contract. And as a result, we're taking the physical assessments in-house with our mobility training department, who will be doing those. Mobility training, it's an excellent fit, as they are the folks that train applicants and volunteers who want to learn about fixed route transit, and they train them to ride our wonderful fixed route transit system that's fully ADA accessible. So they're a great fit for this, and they've been working on training for quite a while and are ready to go. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the course that we put together as a result of, in response to the pandemic. So without further ado, let's show you some of the things that we have done to plan for reopening the pandemic. So please start the slide or the video. Reagan, thank you. So staff have been working very hard on doing this. This is the reception desk. As you walk into the MTC, it's been plexiglass by our RTC facilities department, who did a great job. There's some cutouts there to pass through documentations to applicants and staff. And just to the left of the reception desk is the security desk that you can see there. And that is fully plexiglass partitions for the security officer to sit and monitor applicants and visitors as they come in and enter. So what you don't see is a thermal camera there, and that is going to be there shortly. But what you see there, right next to the vending machine and the Keolis storefront there, is an area that somebody who has an above normal temperature based on the thermal scan will sit, wait a few minutes, and then retest, rescan. And if they are still hot, they will wait for transportation to leave the building. This is our physical assessment course, which we are moving outdoors temporarily due to the COVID in anticipation of reopening. You can see we have a mock street crossing there. And then the course winds around the back to the north parking lot, where applicants will be asked to go across some gravel area, transition to some gravel area from the sidewalk to see that they can navigate their way through that. And then the course will then head north back towards the opening of the MTC, and they will show that they can get on and off a curb. Then they will go down to Hawk Street, which is currently part of the street crossing, is part of the pre-COVID course. And they will cross that street crossing by the bus shelter where buses come in and out. They'll walk down, cross the street again, and come back. You see the bus shelter there. And then they will head back up to the opening of the MTC. The course is about 1,760 feet long, and we give folks about 21 minutes and 20 seconds to complete it. Typically, they complete it sooner than that, but again, this outdoor course hasn't been tested with real applicants. It's just been Jim Champeau, the mobility training supervisor, and his staff have been doing mock assessments in preparation for the opening. And another thing that you did not see there that wasn't available, it's not done yet, but it will be done soon, is the interview room. So we've taken the room that our contractor for physical assessments used to be in, and we have converted that to an interview room, which has partition desks along with plexiglass. And this is all about safety and preparation for reopening for our staff and our customers to be safe. The outdoor course is a temporary solution to minimize the close contact of the assessor and the applicant. And obviously, we're looking forward to resuming normal operations. But until then, all of these precautions have been put in place. Thermal cam will be ready by the end of this month. And we will be ready for our deputy CEO and the C-suite to let us know when we are able to reopen, and we are ready to do that. I want to thank a few groups, the RTC Facilities Department, for all the wonderful work they've done with the plexiglass to get us ready for this. Obviously, Transit Amenities and our RTC Safety and Security for work on the thermal cameras. And then I want to thank the certification staff, along with Brenda Bell and Angela Budavari, the management analyst and the supervisor, along with all their certification staff, and Jim Champeau, mobility training supervisor, and his staff for the hard work that they've been putting in to get ready for these assessments. And then Kenny Rodriguez, the manager of customer care, for not only putting up with me throughout this process, but just coordinating everything and getting what you just saw all ready for us to be prepared to open. So with that, Madam Chair, I will take any questions.
Are there any questions for Dan? Sounds like a lot of work has been done there.
Thank you, Madam.
Well, Dan, once you reopen, are you going to reopen in stages? Are you going to bring in one part, mobility training in maybe first and then certification? Or how are you planning on reopening? Or are you just going to open the doors and start?
What we'll do is we'll put staff through the paces with a limited number of applicants so that not only the certification staff can work through the process, but also our mobility trainers can work through the certificate or the physical assessment process. So it will be a slow go. We'll be able to control that. And it's a good question, and we're in good shape there. But yes, we'll start off slow.
Okay. Great. Anything else for Dan? All right, thank you, Dan. We're all hoping it'll open soon. And now we have a presentation about the mobility training electronic book, and that will be given by Jim Champeau. So Jim, are you ready?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, Jim, 1 second. Madam Chair, this is Reagan Lively for the record. We have only about 8 minutes before 3 o'clock hits. Do we need to extend the meeting?
Jim, how long is your presentation?
I can get through it pretty quick.
Can you get through it in about 6 minutes?
I can.
Okay, go for it.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Jim Champeau, Transit Mobility Program Supervisor for the record. I'm here today to give a presentation on the new mobility training ebook. So before we start, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about it. It's earlier this year, the Mobility Training Department came up with the idea of creating a mobility training ebook. The goal of this ebook was to give customers and educators who have gone through the mobility training process a platform to be able to tell their story in their own words on how RTC mobility training has made a positive difference in their lives. We also want to include biographies from mobility training staff so that families and potential customers can learn a little more about us and why it is we love what we do. We felt that the ebook would be a great tool to help others decide if mobility training would be right for them. And having it posted on the RTC's website would make it readily available to anyone interested. We hope that the ebook will be a tool that can be used to promote the mobility training program and will help shine a light on how important mobility options can be for someone's independence. I personally would like to thank the RTC's Government Affairs Department for their assistance in creating the ebook and recognize my staff, Dayanara Perez, who took the lead in this project and coordinated and compiled all the stories from our customers and educators. In closing, we'll kind of leaf through the book a little bit. I'm going to go to one of our clients whose name is Chris, and I'm just going to read his testimonial for you and how that participating in RTC mobility training has helped him to be more confident and independent. So we have a little bit of an introduction. Then we go on to our riders. These are people that have participated in our program. You can go to the next page. And you can keep going until you get to our client, Chris. So this is Chris, somebody that's participated in our program. So Chris writes, I'm able to be more independent and go more places since I participated in the mobility training program. Taking the city bus helps because when I go to my location, I don't have a time limit and I can be there as long as I want. If I have a weekend with nothing to do, I can just hop on a city bus and just go do activities. Learning how to use the RTC mobile app, Ride RTC, was very helpful. It indicated how long the bus would take to be at the stop and if it's running late or early. The app keeps track of how many stops are along the route and notifies you when your stop is coming up. This helps because you are not on the bus panicking and wondering when you should get off. I would recommend this training because it is helpful for anyone who wants to learn to be more independent. It also empowers paratransit riders to know that they are capable of more than just riding on a paratransit bus. How cool is it to tell your friends that you can take the city bus like everyone else? So Chris is a paratransit rider that wanted to learn how to ride the city bus and just have more transportation options. So it was really, really great working with him. If you could continue flipping through. These are some of the educators that we work with Clark County School District. So we go out to their classrooms, or their classrooms come to us at the MTC, and we teach their students with disabilities on the safe and proper use of fixed route transportation. If you could click through. These are just some of the educators that agreed to kind of tell their stories and how this program has really helped their kids. Then we did a small section just on us, and we wanted to be able to tell our customers and their families just who we are and why we do what we do and why we love interacting with the clients that we have. So if you could continue just clicking through just a little bit. This is Dayanara. That was the my staff that worked on this, and I think she did a fantastic job. Next staff is Danielle. She's been with me the longest. And then finally, I don't know who this guy is, but anyway, we really appreciate all the work that was put into this, and we think this is going to be a really great tool for us. And that concludes my presentation. I can answer any questions if there are any.
Jim, this is Jean, and I do have a question. Is that on the website already?
It is. It's on RTC'S under mobility training, and the link is there, and you can click on it and go through it.
Cool. All right. Are there any questions for Jim? Just a quick run through, Jim, looked really interesting. So I'm glad you guys did this, and we'll give it. I'm going to check it out.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, and for keeping it really short and informative. And thanks so much. And so the last thing on our agenda is the second session of public comment. And we'll start off by asking Reagan if there are any other public comments that you've received.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Reagan Lively, again for the record. There are no public comments at this time.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments from the committee members? Anything you'd like to say before we adjourn?
Madam Chair, this is Dan Hyde. Just a question as to when is our next meeting?
Reagan, do you know when that is?
1 second, let me double check and I'll get right back to you. That would be January 27th.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Then before we adjourn, I would like to thank everyone for coming today, for coming to all these virtual meetings. This has been quite an experience for us all this year. And wishes for a wonderful holiday season. And I'm sure hoping that on the 27th of January, we can be sitting in a room together looking at one another.
Agreed.
So having said that, if there are no other comments, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Madam Chair.
All right, we stand adjourned. Thank you so much.